Welcome into another episode of Debate Night. Disclaimer, if you're watching this now, this episode is a pre-recorded episode. We are currently on the West Coast. Hunter and I are, at least, and Silas as well. So if you are wondering why the subjects in the show might not be addressing something absolutely crazy that just went down at any point in recent events, that would be why. This show, we are going to be going over topics that are less current events and more grand scale of disc golf things, which I think a lot of times are the exciting topics for this show, certainly. But just wanted to give that disclaimer. This is a pre-recorded show, just so you're aware of that. But anyways, we are joined today by Brodie Smith, as always.
So this show's not coming out this week. This is coming out the following week.
Correct.
Got it. Noted.
Okay. Yeah. So if you say anything super current event, you could go ahead and try and like predict the Stanley Cup final right now, and it could be electric.
Are the Panthers still in it?
Yeah, they're in the final versus the Knights.
Sure are. Go Panthers.
I have to take the Knights. Sorry. I'm a Vegas fan.
Robbie C is with us as well.
I got nothing to say after that.
Okay. Hunter is here and not in a closet or outside.
I was just shocked that I was looking over the topic list. And you didn't cover what so-and-so said to so-and-so after they did so-and-so on the course this past weekend.
Yeah, that was crazy. I remember that. And Jonah is with us as well. Noted Panthers fan.
Trevor on the Sweet Mallow Cup shirt.
Oh, thank you.
I guess I'm going against Brodie again today, so go Panthers.
Oh, nice. Let's go.
I mean, it's a good time to be a Florida sports fan right now. I will say that. All right. Well, we're gonna hop right into it. A lot of this show, we're gonna talk about a Instagram story. This is kind of a current event, but there's grand proportions and implications for this topic. That's why we're going over it anyways, because it's not really a current event. But Simon posted an Instagram story where he was calling out a bunch of things in course design, things he liked, things he didn't like, things he wanted to see more of. Hunter and I's perception originally was that some of it we thought made sense, some of it we thought did not make sense at all. But I wanted to get takes on each individual thing that he was proposing. So we're going to kind of go over them as a few different topics. But we're going to start with the first one. And that was that he was in favor of adding more mandatories to courses. And his reasoning was that we don't currently have any properties that were built specifically to be a disc golf course. He was kind of saying how he originally didn't like mandos, but has come to realize that we need more mandatories. So my question is simply, do you agree or disagree? Brodie, lead off for us.
Short answer is agree. Long answer is for a few reasons. The first one being a lot of times mandos will prevent players from throwing a much easier shot that has low risk and high reward. And only a handful of players can throw that shot. You know, whether it's, you need a 500-foot power hyzer, whatever. There comes a time where I don't think it doesn't make sense for players that have the power to throw an easier shot with less risk and have to force a bunch of other players not to be able to throw that shot. So that's the first reason why I want the Mando, is to prevent people from just basically chucking shots. Now, if there's OB and there's risk involved of where they're throwing over OB the whole time and it's coming back, then I'm okay with something like, let's keep the creativity. Let's have people have options off the tee. I'm fine with that. I'm just not cool when it's just like, you can just chuck your shot and wherever it ends up, you'll be fine. I don't like that. The second reason I like mandos is it makes a hole that might be not the most challenging off the tee all of a sudden become very challenging to the player. So if you give a player, put them in the woods, let's say, and give them a 20-foot gap 100 feet off the tee, and there's trees all around, right? If you give them that gap, the high-level players are mostly going to hit that gap on a consistent basis. However, if all of a sudden you make that gap now a double mando, it's similar to having like an island hole where it's stroke and distance. It now puts a little bit more pressure in the player's mind of, if I do not hit this gap, I am now going to basically make a bogey. Versus when there isn't mandos there, they know that if they hit the gap, great, they're probably going to birdie the par 3 or whatever it is. But if they miss the gap, they can scramble and still try and make par. So I think the Mando in that scenario adds a little bit more pressure. Now, the one thing I will say real quick, you have to make it to where the viewer at home can visualize the Mando. So whether that is in the drone footage showing, or a graphic where you like put like red on the sides to show that like this can't be done. I think a lot of problems is like the Mando signs and stuff you can't really see as a spectator or viewing it live. And so it makes it really hard for spectators that way. I don't like that aspect.
That's a good point. Sometimes a Mando looks so obvious as if it's like a field goal upright. And then other times it's like, now which tree are they talking about there?
Correct. Exactly.
Robbie, what do you think about Mandos?
Yeah, I agree with what Brodie said in terms of adding difficulty. I think that another thing that it helps bring in is how many times do we watch Pro Tour play and we hear the phrase, they broke the hole? So mandatories allow us to keep the integrity of course design intact. I understand when we had the cameraman get hit in the head, obviously Amando is not necessarily helping us too much in that situation, but I go to, I think it was Beaver State Fling, where we had another Eagle McMahon over the top, and he almost literally hit a baby because he went up and over these trees and it dropped straight down on the crowd, on the spectators. So that is not a safe situation. So I think another thing we have to look at from mandatories is that it's a safety thing as well. If we want to continue to bring spectators out to the course and fill the courses, we need to make sure that the spectators are staying safe. And like Brodie mentioned, I think what the mandatories do is a lot of times holes are not perceived as difficult by the spectators as they are actually from the pros. I think of hole 2 at the preserve, where there is the double Mando gap that they have to hit off in the distance. From a spectator's point of view, it looks like it's right on top of the tee box. So there are other holes that could be even made to perceive as being as difficult as they actually are with the addition of mandatories on the tour.
Yeah, good point for sure. Hunter, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that I agree that I'm in favor of adding more Mandos. I actually originally, when Grip Locked first started, you'd be able to find clips of me disagreeing with what I'm saying now. I used to say that Mandos were only for safety and that people shouldn't be overusing them and they were gimmicky, blah, blah, blah. I disagree with that now. But I do think one important thing is you don't want to take away the players' creativity. So you don't want players breaking holes and stuff like that. That's all true, what Robbie and Brodie have said. But you also don't want to just make everyone play the same boring cookie cutter round. So I think we have to be very tasteful with where we place these Mandos. But I think what Mandos provide is a really good opportunity to make disc golf harder without it looking gimmicky or playing gimmicky or feeling gimmicky. People seem to hate a ton of OB, but if you add Mandos in the right spots, you can make a more open course play and feel a lot more wooded because you're not asking anymore. You're forcing people to take certain shot selections, and you can turn a wide open field into a little bit more of a wooded golf vibe. With the addition of being able to actually have spectators and stuff along the side. So there's a lot of questions I think Mandos bring in as they get more additional. I do think this is only true for the Pro Tour because we don't want random course designers just slapping 10 Mandos on a hole. But in general, yes, more Mandos, agree.
Okay. All right, Jonah, wrap it up for us. What do you think about the Mandos?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Simon phrased the take was kind of weird. And he said like the reason why we should have more Mandos is because there's not enough disc golf properties. I think those are two different issues. Yes, we need to have more disc golf properties, and Mandos need to be played on more courses generally, but I think one problem doesn't solve the other. Two bads don't make it good in this case. And I think that in order to have Mandos be effective, the current rule for the Mandos has to be changed. I think right now it's something like if the disc enters the restricted space after the Mando as well, it is still considered to have missed the Mando. I'm not really sure on the exact.
That's correct.
wording.
That's a new rule.
Okay, yeah. So I think that like on certain courses that where a lie is unplayable after the Mando, obviously that's going to make sense. But like it also takes away from having him shaping a line around a Mando. So I mean, like I think the way that works, it's kind of like just a weird little discrepancy. And I think the PDGA needs to take a look at that if Mandos are to be played properly. And I really hope Simon was happy with the Portland Open design because there were plenty of Mandos out there. And what's funny about that is it's one of them on Glendoveer East hole 2, I believe, took away a Simon line that he threw last year. So that's something that I think is just really interesting that he had that take. And now that I think he's starting to have a more safer game, starting to understand the importance of those restricted routes.
Yeah, really, really good point about it. It is interesting that Simon, what is it, Brodie?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like we need to have like a new like button or something, like a rebuttal button, so we could like use it once or twice. So because I know people don't like it when I like want to say more after someone says something. I don't know if that's a new thing, but I want to rebuttal something that Robbie said. So I don't.
Okay,
Rebuttal button.
You may hit the fake rebuttal.
Okay, no idea how Robbie got more points than me when he said that the Mando is going to stop people throwing grenades. I guess if you have a
if you have a topside triple
if you
Mando.
have a topside triple, yeah. If you all of a sudden you're starting to put like planks in the, I mean,
if you have a tunnel, if you have a tunnel shot, it's going to be a lot more people are going to not try to go over the top of a tunnel. If you have like a Mando that's a double Mando, a lot of times people aren't going to try and throw over top of a tunnel shot. Like when there's a double Mando, because I feel like it's hard to
if it's super tight, sure. Yeah. Like if it's like a 10-foot gap, but if you have a Mando that is like 50 feet this way and 50 feet this way, which a lot of times that's how the Mandos, like in the Portland Open, that's how a lot of the Mandos are they're basically prohibiting you from like throwing out the side of the hole and going in. People are still going to go over the top if they want to. I mean, I just played with Eagle at one of the most wooded courses ever, and he was throwing grenades where you're just like, you don't even think that's possible. The way to get rid of people throwing that shot is not Mandos. It's actually putting trouble around, having OB, having hazard, having stuff to where if you throw it up into the trees and you get a bad kick in the trees, it's less likely, less control to have that fall where you want it to be versus actually throwing a shot like through the trees. So like, that's all I wanted to say is like, if you want to get rid of the safety grenade on top of the headshot, it's not Mandos. It's putting trouble around hazards, OB, to where you're not just chucking a shot and hoping it gets somewhere near crashing into a tree.
But there's obviously a gap that you were supposed to go through further down the fairway rather than going over trees immediately to your right and throwing the grenade that way. There's a gap that, when
he throws the grenade straight up and straight down.
I understand what a grenade is. I'm saying the fairway exists as the course designer made it. And so your Mando doesn't have to be like, it's not a height thing. If the hole shapes straight and then cuts to the right, I'm truly thinking of the hole that Eagle literally almost hit a kid.
Yeah, the par 5.
Yeah.
So you're talking about
I'm saying put a Mando in the gap up there, so that way it has to go left or right of that.
I see the point is like if you have a lot more controllability with like spectator safety if you know a player cannot throw this direction and will never choose to throw this direction. So I get the essence of that point, because like Robbie's saying, if you make it to where you cannot cut this corner, you're not allowed to, at least there's a more of a flow of where players
safety
have to
right
go.
here for spectators to sit.
But I mean, as the grenades will always be used to some extent, certainly.
Yeah. And I think they should be. Like, I agree. I just want, if we're going to if we want 5,000, 10,000 people at a course, eventually we have to like player creativity, being able to just bomb it over these trees. Those people are in danger. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's definitely something to navigate. After the first round, Jonah's at 4 points, Robbie at 3, Hunter and Brodie at 2. Really nice pickup, Jonah, on the Mando actually taking away one of the Simon lines. I think it's interesting that he is making that point nowadays when that's probably his game just didn't play that way back in the day. He was the guy to take those lines. All right, so on to the next point that Simon brought up, and I think this one's a little more controversial. He said that drop zones should be eliminated and all OB should be played as hazard. He said that drop zones should be eliminated, play it where it lies. I think both of these were kind of the essence of play it where it lies, because he thinks that promotes better golf.
Yeah, just real quick, because I literally just talked to him yesterday.
Yeah.
The drop zones, he means like for mandatories, not for like island. Yeah, not for like island holes or anything like that. It's literally just if you miss the Mando, you normally have to like play right by it. He's saying,
he wants you to play where it lies, though. Yeah,
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So drop zones for Mando should be eliminated. Yes. Play it where it lies, and all OB should be played as hazard. Both kind of the essence of you kind of end up where you end up with a stroke. Agree or disagree to both or either of those points, Robbie?
Yeah. So I think having it be a world of, okay, I missed this Mando, and so now I'm way up here. Something we talked about in certain courses of having to scramble, things like that. Like there's a world that if OB is not hazard, I can just blast it all the way up there. And if it goes poorly, okay, cool, I just drop and put myself honestly in an ideal like maybe better footing because the OB is safer, whatever. So I agree with OB being played as hazard. I think that's a really cool opportunity. Once again, not having elite level distance, I am sure. And those players look at holes differently than we do. So understanding that if suddenly, okay, I'm not going to be OB if I don't make it hovering OB the entire way, I'm not all the way back here. Now I'm way further up. Do we see players take more aggressive shots? I think it would be an interesting way to add creativity back, especially when pairing this with the more Mandos opportunity. And so I think the rub is if we add more Mandos and then we eliminate drop zones, then okay, like yeah, you're somewhat creating the same exact problem of okay, I blast past a Mando and I get all the way up there. Okay, I don't even care about hitting the gap at this point because I'm just going to take a stroke, whatever that is, instead of having to come back and play the hole once again as designed. So where do we draw the line on course design sticking and allowing player creativity? So I would say it's either drop zones have to stay and more Mandos exist, or less Mandos exist and we have however you word that properly.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting how they would coexist. Hunter, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I disagree with both of these takes in relation to them being blanket wide statements. So I agree in some essence, but I think what I agree with more so is the decision on a lot of these should go tournament and should be in the Pro Tour's hands. I think this is something where the Pro Tour should be pulled away from the PDGA, where the Pro Tour can decide, like, because there might be a hole where Mando with no drop zone might make sense for some reason. But to Robbie's point, any Mando I've played a lot of times, if that Mando wasn't there, I could break this hole, and I would much rather throw just like up over these trees and have a guaranteed 3 than have to play out and around and hope I get a 3, or the situation may be. So drops are important, but I don't want to completely outlaw that whole, like, you don't have to have a drop zone idea, because I think that that's something that should be on the tournament director and course specific. Same thing with OB and hazard. That's already options. They're already out there. I think there should probably be more strategic usage of hazards on courses, but I don't think it's a blanket statement of all OB should be hazard and all drop zones should be eliminated. I just like the idea of the tournament, specifically the Pro Tour, again, not your local C tier, specifically the Pro Tour, having more of a say in how they handle island rules, how they handle drop zone rules, and how they handle their OB rules. Whereas right now, the PGA rules are the PGA rules. They apply to a C tier the same as the Pro Tour, and I don't really like that.
Yeah, valid point. Jonah, what do you think about the Mando and OB rules?
Yeah, this kind of goes back to that restricted space argument from the last question, in that area can all be played as hazard, and that's honestly a good idea on some holes. Then again, pace of play is still a real issue. Even on a course without a lot of OB, without a lot of hazard, without drop zones like Beaver State, to an extent. I think Brodie, you said this on Tour Life. The pace of the round was like 3.5 hours at minimum, and so I think that OB, drop zones, Mandos, all of those things can contribute to a better pace of play and a better viewing experience for live disc golf as well. Because think about it, like when we see people scrambling, we saw this all the time at Austin, I believe. It is like one of the worst optics for the sport that we have, especially live. So, and with the commentators not really knowing that position, post-produce it's a little different, because a lot of times it's players who have played the course maybe have been in that position, and that's a little bit different. But I think that having the drop zone next to Mandos in certain situations, not all situations, obviously, like Hunter said, but in those certain situations where if they are in that hazard space or in that restricted space and their lie is really inaccessible, hard to film, I think that the Pro Tour has to make the decision to spare a pace of play for the tournament director and for their own viewership benefits, to kind of allow those in more places than I think Simon wants to have. And then in terms of the hazard, I think that it's definitely underutilized, kind of what everyone's been saying so far. But I do think that OB is still an important part of the game, and it kind of ties back to that pace of play thing. We don't want people taking their life from water. Like Simon didn't obviously intend for that, but something that he maybe that's what his take kind of came off as, is, oh, no OB, only hazard. Well, what about Giant Lake, hole 1 at Maple Hill, hole 8 at Maple Hill? I'm trying to think of other like all those water hazards. So just something to maybe like think about before you type down, Simon. We don't want people swimming on the Pro Tour.
It was definitely a very like extreme take. Brodie, what do you think about the rules?
Okay, first off, pace of play, to respond to Jonah's thing, that is based solely on, I think a big thing is having bad players in the field, not having a cut, and players just in general being slow at walking in between their shots, all those things. We see the majority of the time the first round being the slowest round because you have the bad players spread out throughout all the tee times. So instead of having all the bad players play together, which actually they will play faster than having one bad player on a bunch of whole different tee times that are hitting trees and slowing down everyone. That's why we see pace of play kind of speed up throughout the tournament. That's the pace of play thing. Second thing with what Robbie was saying about OB and Hazard, or I guess what Simon was saying about OB and Hazard, I definitely like OB still being involved, but I agree with Simon that there definitely needs to be more Hazard. There's a lot of course design that you can stop people from throwing 400 feet way off to the left and then being able to basically pull it all the way back to the fairway and have a very easy upshot to save their par. That's where we need to have those people that are way off versus the person that's barely off. And I even like to have the idea of, let's do like 100 feet of Hazard and then maybe 100 feet of, and then after that, maybe OB, right? We don't need to have, like in certain situations, we don't need to have people playing so far away. Maybe it's a safety issue or whatever, but you can have like that layeredness of where if you're just off the fairway, you're into Hazard and you can, throw your shot. And then if you're really far off, you basically are OB or whatever. And then you can also do the stroke and distance, which I like. Now, hot take. No drop zones for Mandos. Let's play it like they do in the European Open. It's a rethrow, no stroke penalty.
I mean, yeah, that would be.
You missed the Mando.
An interesting way to do it.
Yeah, you missed the Mando. You just have to rethrow, no stroke penalty, but now you're rethrowing two. You're throwing two off the tee, and you still have to make that same exact shot. And you still have. I think that all of a sudden adds an element because I like that rule a lot because I think the stroke and distance for that a little bit too punishing. We need that more. I think that's what we need more is like you throw OB, don't do stroke and distance, just do a rethrow.
Yeah. Well, that's like kind of like, isn't that the drop zone at USDGC? The one is like that.
No, European Open. No, European Open. That's what I said.
It's hole 16 at European Open where it's like the bunker
does USDGC
rule.
not have one like that? Or is that a stroke penalty and a rethrow from the drop zone? Okay. I couldn't remember if that.
European Open's the only tournament we play on tour that does
that's right.
Rethrow,
I do remember
no
that now.
stroke penalty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's not super punishing.
No, yeah.
So, but it does it starts adding a lot of pressure to your throws.
Yeah. I always love the rethrow because people have to choose a new disc than they were intending on throwing. And that is fascinating. I do really like the idea of the layered Hazard to OB. That kind of is like the idea of us having multiple cuts of rough or rough than OB. I actually really like that. I've never thought of doing
quick
it.
Point on that point, Trevor. I just think that like if you play the OB rules as they are right now, then you're playing. Are you playing the OB from Hazard, Brodie? Or are you playing it from the fairway? Because that is a big benefit.
You would be playing it from the Hazard, but you wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah. If you play it from the fairway, it's like almost like almost worth it just to go OB, right? Okay.
No.
I see.
It would just basically make it to where it's like you want people to like have to throw in the woods and stuff for Hazard, and then if someone goes like at a certain point, if someone goes so far out, like it's unplayable, that's where you would have the OB line. Like to me, the OB line should be for like unplayable. Like if you go in this area, it is not playable. Like you're in a landfill.
That's the idea. A lot of times with golf out of bounds is like this is just the point where there's just
outside the property.
Yeah, there's just no point to be hitting
or like another fairway or something, right?
Hence out of bounds, like outside the bounds of the course.
Very true. Very true. Good points all around there for sure. And some good ideas. Jonah, after this round, has 7 points still in the lead. Brodie and Hunter with 6 and Robbie with 5. Moving into our last point that Simon said, I think this is the most controversial and one that's been brought up in disc golf in a number of different ways. But Simon had some very interesting ideas. And he said that certain landing areas should be made to limit how a player can throw a disc. He brought to... he mentioned the standstill only, which we've heard that before. But then he also said like forehand only or roller only even as a possibility. So agree or disagree with these landing area throw restrictions, Hunter?
For the current landscape of disc golf, I agree only with the standstill only. Go to roller only, everything like that. I think it gets too gimmicky. Again, you're taking away players' creativity and it becomes kind of like a sideshow. In the future, I would love to see ground manipulation, if you will, to enforce a similar thing, i.e., tall grass, sand, something where it's tough for you to run up. But in the short term, we don't have that. I like the standstill only idea. But again, I think that most of Simon's points really come down to the Pro Tour needs more freedom when it comes to rules making for and course design for their courses. And I think that this really all goes back to, I think the Pro Tour needs to split from the PDGA, and you can just say that way the Pro Tour can decide this is how we're playing an island hole. We don't have to get a waiver for every island hole we have. We don't have to play Mandos the same way on every single hole. We don't have to have drop zones X, Y, and Z. We can throw all that out the window and design what's best for the course. Design the best use of hazard. Design the best use of OB. Maybe there is holes that stroke and distance is the best way to go. Maybe there is X, Y, or Z. And you don't have to worry about the sanctioning and the PDGA rules. I think this is just really Simon just hitting this nail on the head over and over and over. The Pro Tour needs more creative freedom when it comes to their rules and their course.
It would certainly open up a lot of possibilities.
Standstill only is the only one even worth considering.
Okay. Jonah, are you in agreement, or should we consider more of the possibilities?
Yeah, I'm actually going to stick to the Pro Tour PGA tangent on Hunter's point really fast. I think that if the Pro Tour has more freedom, I do agree with that take. However, then if the PDGA still owns all the majors, then we're playing by a different set of rules for the most important tournaments. And I think that the players may or may not like that. But then again, on the standstill point, I really actually think that there's a really good opportunity here, and that's for having shorter courses be more competitive. And that allows for more room for spectators to kind of fill in the rest of the fairway, more or less. And it gives the opportunity for players to still execute a difficult shot without having to worry about overthrowing a fairway or whatnot. Kind of like the rest of the points with the hazard and the OB and stuff like that. I mean, when we think of every other sport, with the exception of traditional golf, what sport can we think of where the playing surface is larger than the spectator area? I don't think there's a single one out there. And there's a reason for that. We want as many fans out there as possible, getting eyes on the disc, on the players, and on the decision making. And I think that this standstill only will definitely, if not for every place off the tee, then in certain areas, it's just a more more ropes and more tape and stuff like that. Brodie's waving it in. He's trying to get it to him. Bottom line, I think that the standstill only really needs to be in the place. Hopefully the PGA is listening to this podcast and can maybe think about that.
They're not listening to us. All right, Brodie, what do you want?
Feed me. F1, NASCAR, Tour de France, cross country race, surfing. You want to keep going, or is that good?
I don't think NASCAR does not have a bigger playing surface than spectator area.
NASCAR's track is a quarter of a mile.
They're surrounded by
360
fans.
by fans.
They have a massive. But I'm saying, if you stretch that thing out, the way that it's shaped is for the fans.
Think about the shape that the stands make at the NASCAR track.
Tour de France. Okay, what your response is that, Trevor?
No, I would agree with those two.
Yeah, but then
I was just NASCAR that.
The rows of spectators off the track or off the road for bike racing, for example, that is way as a larger surface area than the actual road that the bikers
more
run.
People, what? Have you ever gone to a PGA Tour event where there's a lot of people there?
I've never been to a PGA Tour event in person, so I can't speak for
That's tough. Go to any PGA, go to any major, go anything, and all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, there are a lot of people around all these greens. The playing surface in golf is the tee, the greens. Those are the main ones. They have stands, they have stadiums, they have all those things. The reason we don't have that in disc golf is no one would feel them. We have 200 people watching lead card. Our problem is not that our sport is on a long surface area. Our problem is not enough people are watching the sport. So,
and what I'm saying is it's the standstill only encourages, more the availability for more spectators as well. So that's kind of my point there.
I like if you would have gone standstill, making courses smaller. The standstill will allow that, and you would have gone like we could put our disc golf courses in more areas, then maybe I would have gone with that. I don't think the spectator route was the right mode for that, because I still think that's prohibiting spectate. Like, I don't think that's a problem in disc golf right now. But to go to the thing, my point is on this, I'm with Hunter. So give me no points. I agree with everything Hunter says. I think the only thing of this that we can go from
This is the first time in history.
I think the only thing we can go from this is the standstill. I think the other things he was just like spitballing. That was why he ended up deleting his Instagram posts, which he ended up saying on Tour Life. He was like, was walking and was like putting out his thoughts, which again, I appreciate. I think we need more people to do this on tour so that we can actually hear what people have to say, whether it's ridiculous or not.
Sure.
But I'm with Hunter. Until we are able to put a bunch of soft sand, until we're able to control the height of grass, which we can't do right now at the majority, if not all the courses we play on tour, the next best option is just saying like, hey, if you land over here, you're in standstill. That makes a huge kind of disadvantage for being off the fairway versus on the fairway when we can't do those things. But like a place like Preserve, a place that like Hale can control everything out there, that's where you see the tall grass. You get off the fairway, you're in tall grass. Now all of a sudden you have to throw that 500 shot. It's 500-foot shot. It's a lot harder to do through 3 feet of tall grass than in the fairway.
Yeah, very true, very true. Robbie,
and apologize for the NASCAR take, but I still think I still think that kind of works a little bit.
Okay, Robbie,
a little bit.
Finish up for us, Robbie.
For a brief second, I've forgotten what the actual question is because it's taken about an hour and a half to get to my
got away from it so much
to my time. But here we go. I'm going to go spicy here. Why not? Let's lean into it. I'm going to say that I love the idea that it feels gimmicky when you hit the other sides. And, call me the cheese ball I am. I don't care. Here's why I love it. It's throwing a well-executed roller is a skill in disc golf. Anyone that thinks they can just get out and throw this crazy cool backhand roller exactly where they're looking for it to go is something that I challenge so many people to get out there and try that. Forehand rollers, you can practice a little easier because you can throw them at your bag, things like that. But having opportunities for players to show off that skill set, I think it also encourages people who maybe don't have a certain skill set or a certain throw in their bag. If the OB areas are inhibiting them and making them throw these shots, it also creates more freedom because they're going to have to practice that roller because they know, hey, the roller only option is going to exist here on this course. So now, wow, turns out James Conrad's actually sneaky dirty at throwing rollers. So now he's going to look at throwing those rollers instead of having to launch himself off the front of the tee box. Like, there are other things that that we can do in encouraging and pushing the skill ceiling of the Pro Tour and making them practice other shots while also maintaining the integrity of course design and everything we were shooting for with all of the OB possibilities. So bring on the rollers, keep Brodie's NASCAR thing going. More rollers, more fun.
You don't encourage more freedom by restricting the type of throw someone can do.
Also, was Robbie's big take there was James Conrad is going to find out that he's good at throwing rollers because now all of a sudden he landed in a roller only spot to where he has to throw a roller. And now he's like, oh, wait a second. I've been good at throwing rollers my whole life.
Sneaky dirty.
Sneaky dirty.
Listen, yes, there is an interesting analogy, and it's far more aggressive in the rollers only situation. But if you think about golf, when players land in a bunker, now it's because of the way their lie is. It's not because there's a set of rules. But you hit a bunker shot out of a bunker, and it's a pretty unique shot to golf. Now, a flop shot is kind of similar, but you take a unique stance. You have to shuffle your feet into the sand. You are forced to throw or hit a unique shot out of those bunkers. Players will aim for or avoid bunkers because of their bunker game. In high school golf, my freshman year, I was awful out of bunkers, so I played in a way to avoid them. So there is kind of an analogy there with like having something like this in disc golf would be a pretty effective way to see how players approached it. Like, imagine players who didn't have a forehand, just avoiding the forehand only area is like the plague. Now, it's a lot more gimmicky because it's unnatural. Like, when somebody lands in the sand, they have to hit a bunker shot. It's the best way to get out of sand.
But how are they going to learn the shots unless they're forced to learn the shots? And we have players who are making it as pros, and they've been on the Pro Tour for 10 years, and they still have bad form, and they're still doing all this weird stuff. This is how we get them. This is how we elevate it, baby.
Who has bad form?
Yeah,
Right,
Robbie.
I'm not
No,
walking down.
I mean, it'd be like in disc golf if like the roller
As the field
only
gets
area
deeper, they'll get
had like a
eliminated.
coin slot that you had to throw it up and down
Yeah.
through. That'd be like
man.
the similarities. But I see your
Just do that
point,
with
Robbie, and I
Mandos.
respect your point.
Yeah, one thing too, Trevor, that I would like to see also is like we talk about the bunkers. One of the reasons why bunkers are so difficult is the lips, having to hit over the lips. So in disc golf, that also could work really well. It's like if you're on the fairway, you don't have to throw anything over anything. But then all of a sudden, like if we can think of like the fairway being flat and the rough kind of like fades off like this, and then at one point the ground kind of goes up, but it's only going up on the right side.
Yeah.
So now if you fade off the fairway, now all of a sudden you're like 10 feet lower than the fairway. And now you're going to have to figure out how to throw like something.
I've always said like
that's going to be tough.
Like the pot bunkers, like you see at St. Andrews, those would be effective in disc golf because they funnel discs. Disc would fall into them. And then like you said, you'd have to throw very awkward shots. I think like that kind of thing would be
that's cool.
The best. Cause like, it's not completely gimmicky, but you'd force people to basically throw almost like overhand flex shots to get out of them. Like it would be very interesting.
But also think about the advertising space. This is the Forza Motorsport 7 forehand zone, brought to you by Forza Motorsport 7, coming soon to Xbox One.
Do you have an affiliate link or something? Dang,
Yeah,
that was a well put together ad read. I respect the concept, Robbie. I'm gonna give you another point because I respect your bravery.
I had to shoot for the moon on that
and
one.
I respect the idea that like that is something that would make disc golf very interesting. But heading into our last subject here before elimination, Jonah is still in the lead at 9, Hunter at 8, Robbie and Brodie tied at 7. We're going to step away from the Simon takes and talk about something that Hunter and I were kind of going into on Grip Locked. At the point of you watching this, it would have been a week or two ago. But Paul's trip to Europe. So Paul heading into Europe with a season behind him so far that has not probably been up to his standard. And my question here is a trip to Europe in the middle of the Pro Tour season, taking a break from the Pro Tour, is that good timing considering his season so far or bad timing? Jonah, what do you think?
So I hope I'm taking the not so obvious side here. And I'm going to say it's bad timing, and here's why. So I believe he's playing 6 Euro Tour events, and I think Sula Open's included in that, if I'm correct. So that's 6 events, 6 weeks of playing, and like all that off weeks of travel, and he's not competing week in and week out against the top US pros. Now, that being said, he's going to maybe get complacent, playing well enough to win, I would say a majority of those events. But, not playing his best, like at every single event, like kind of how he's been playing this year. And he hasn't had a bad year by any means compared to everyone else's standards. Like for his standards, yeah, it's a bad year, but like, for a normal player, only having 2 finishes outside the top 15
say my name.
isn't
Just
awful.
do it.
I mean, I don't know. Like Brodie's standards are different than Brodie has really high standards, guys. I don't want to burst his bubble, but having only 2 finishes outside the top 15 really isn't awful per se for the majority of players. For Paul, obviously, he doesn't want to be at that level. But I mean, but then, and that he's still 10th in Pro Tour points. That's better than Nico Santola, better than Simon, who has a win, better than Emerson, who has a win. So he's not really having like an awful season. But, playing the level of golf he is, doing all that winning over there in Europe, by the time the rest of the tour comes to Europe, he's going to be like way out of practice competing against all those US players, like Eagle, Chris Dickerson. Sometimes, hopefully he comes back to form. I would love to see him be competitive again. And I'm not even sure if Simon's going back to Europe until the European Open. So things like that. I mean, granted, he does step it up in majors and he loves the European Open, one of his favorite events. So hopefully we get to see that again this season, him and Eagle running away with it last year. But I think that, this comes at a bad point because it's going to only diminish his ability to come back with the vengeance and kind of keep his mental game strong enough to fight through all of those adversaries.
Okay. Bad time. Brodie, what do you think?
So the question is like, what is the goal? Like what, and I guess that's the question for a lot of players. Like what are they trying to do? And I would say the majority of players, they're trying to win, right? They're obviously trying to win the tournaments they play in. But I think also the Tour Championship has become quite an importance for a lot of players to qualify to get in the Tour Championship at the end of the year. It's the tournament that the Disc Golf Pro Tour put the most money in, so it's got the biggest purse. That all seems like the big goal, and that seems like what the Disc Golf Pro Tour is continuing to push with these Elite Plus events that Hunter love with more points. So if that is the goal, right? If the goal is to qualify for the Tour Championship and obviously get as high of a seed as possible, give yourself the best chance to win the Tour Championship, then the timing of this is really bad. You're missing an Elite Plus event. There's only 2 of those. These are the points at the Elite Plus event are the highest that you can get outside of majors. Then you're also missing 4 elite events. We have Preserve, we have what is it? DDO, Preserve,
Des Moines,
and then Idlewild, I think, might be the 4th. So we have 4 elite events also that you're missing. So as far as like how that looks, that's terrible timing. But if your goal is not to, play in the Tour Championship or have a high seeding in the Tour Championship, then it doesn't really matter when you go over there. There's like, as far as like the timing goes, it's the best timing for him because the Sula Open is going to be the biggest event in Europe outside of the European Open, and then the European Open's right after that. So it leads up perfectly for that. So if we're talking about what's best for Paul's like schedule, then it's the best timing, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It all depends on what your goal is.
True. Yeah, very true.
Like how the question's framed is kind of open-ended, so I don't really know how to answer it, but
well, sure.
Depends.
Yeah. Robbie, what do you think? Good or bad timing for Paul's season? And Robbie, we can't hear you.
I was muted because I was eating my crackers. I apologize.
You're
everyone.
back. You're good.
Here we go. What if I told you that the PDGA Player of the Year was going to be a 5-time Pro Tour winner, with one of those being a major? And I realize this is beautiful because Hunter is not the host. And so 5-time winner on the Pro Tour, because as Paul heads over there, since they've adjusted it, so many of the events he's playing are going to be silver events. So in this Player of the Year argument, when you're not necessarily feeling like you're having the year up to your standards, head over there, grab those silver events, win them, get the mojo flowing. Sure, I think it's a great time for Paul to head over there, because worst case scenario, he doesn't win them all. And he goes, you know what? 2023 off year. That's what it is. But he does go over there and dominates. And what do you know? Like I said, 5-time winner. It's going to be hard for people to disagree with that, because logically, that's what it is. So and he's already got, everyone's going to be jet lagged, all that jazz. Not Paul. He's basically going to be European by the time the European Open comes around. So you're seeing Paul winning it.
Okay. Hunter, what do you have to say about all that?
I'm not even going to address that lunacy that just came out of Robbie's mouth, but I am going to say that his end result is true. I think this is great timing for Paul, mainly because of Brodie's favorite point, Brodie's favorite thing I say, momentum. Paul is a huge momentum player. And so what I think this does is he's not getting momentum over here. He's not getting momentum on the Pro. He's struggling this season. But it is slightly unfortunate. This is a pre-recorded episode because I don't have a way to know if my take is already playing out or not, because he has already played an event when I say this. But here's my take prior to him going is I think he goes over there. I think he goes on a winning streak. The vibes are going to be high. He loves being in Europe. The European fan base absolutely loves Paul. He's going to be feeling good. I think he's going to go over there, rattle off a bunch of wins. The PCS Open happens, boom, win. European Open happens, boom, win. All of a sudden, he has one Pro Tour win, and a major win, a real Pro Tour win, and a major win. He comes back with a chance of having 2 majors and a Pro Tour win, and he's coming straight back into Ledgestone, which is also an event that's great for him with a full head of steam. Coming off of back-to-back wins, going into Ledgestone, there's a chance that we finish Ledgestone out, and we have Paul McBeth sitting with 2 Pro Tour wins and a major championship. And then, yeah, he could very easily put himself into Player of the Year. So I think it's a great timing. He's got to shake up the season. It's not going to get any worse, him going to Europe.
Brodie, what do you have to say?
Rebuttal button. I will again agree with Hunter and say that my take on momentum, I agree, Hunter. I'm wrong. You are right. Momentum is a thing. Paul won the Alberto de la Baja Paul won the Alberto de la Baja 2023. He won it. He took the momentum into Las Vegas and got 6. Paul won the Discraft Presents Sun Kings Throw Down the Mountain. He won that. He took that momentum and got 25th at Music City Open. I'm agreeing with you. Paul works off momentum. It's a real thing. He takes
Both
those
of those
wins.
are one-off, man.
He takes these
Go
wins at
5.
these 2 smaller events that no one was really playing in them. Then he goes to full field events. He
Brody
brings
Smith,
that.
21.
He wins again, man. I agree with you.
Hey,
Momentum. Hey,
let's just let the chips fall.
If you're not picking Eagle this tournament, Eagle just won the last tournament. You know what?
Actually, momentum
don't
continued on a
even
future
show
episode
up.
of Debate Night.
Here's the thing. If you're playing, I shouldn't even show up. Ezra's here. Aaron's. We shouldn't even show up. Eagle won last event. He's going to win this event. He's got too much momentum. Actually, you know what?
Because
Who has the
momentum
most
guarantees a win.
Ricky actually has the most momentum.
Yeah, Ricky's back, baby.
Ricky's back.
Loves
He's got
Ricky's a momentum guy.
Momentum all the time.
Does anyone have momentum? If everyone has momentum, that's
Yes.
a
It's like
question
a
you need to
giant
ask.
ball of success
That's a
rolling
question
straight
you
to
need
the
to ask,
forehand only
Hunter.
zone.
All right.
Hey, I'm
I mean,
just
in theory,
saying, I have
momentum's
watched it
defined by
time
mass
and
times
time
volume.
again.
So
Okay.
in
Well,
theory, we're all
I've
moving.
watched
We all
it
got momentum.
time and time again. Paul gets hot, stays hot. I think if he goes over to Europe and he wins multiple times, he comes back to the States feeling great, and I think he comes back hot. And I think that the field he plays against, to Jonah's point, I don't think that matters. A win's a win to Paul, and if he rattles off 5 in a row and then takes Sula and the European Open, yeah, that guy's got momentum.
I'd have
That's
to
a big
agree.
if,
Five-time
Hunter.
Pro Tour
That was a
champion.
big if, but I would agree. There's nothing wrong with
That's
that
a big if,
statement.
but I'm saying if that's true, the dude has momentum. I think he's the favorite to win Ledgestone if everything else I just said happened.
All right. Well, you guys can both.
You have to win. You have to real quick. You have to win
Oh my
5
gosh.
events in a row to have momentum.
Yes.
Is that how many events?
That's the multiplier.
If it's
all
not
right.
5, there's no momentum.
Enough
Yep.
of that. You guys are both eliminated. Robbie and
Only
Jonah.
silver. Only silver. If it's a Pro Tour event, then one time gets you momentum.
Robbie and Jonah are moving on to our elimination or our final round here with 10 points each, all tied up. So let's head on to our rapid fire round. All right. 2 just civil gentlemen here in our rapid fire round.
It's the
Tied up at
glasses,
10
Trevor, man.
points.
It's the glasses. It's got to be the
Yeah,
glasses.
that's right. That's right. It must be the glasses. These guys have some serious momentum going into this round. I'll tell you that much. Because you're all tied up, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. It just happens like this a lot, I'm realizing. Silly me. Jonah, what do you think the number is?
I'm going to go 5 right down the middle.
Robbie?
I'm going 6.
Yeah, it's 6.
It is literally never changed.
It did one time, I think. I did one time.
I did one time.
Robbie, would you like to go first or second?
I'll take first, baby. Put me on a
Okay.
box.
We're going to go back to something we did on the last episode, which is kind of this subject. Is it actually a big deal? Because I think disc golf, a lot of times we hyper focus on things that maybe aren't a big deal, or maybe they are, and we're not giving them enough focus. So this is a pretty hot topic. We actually had a recent winner on the tour. Jen Allen is somebody who has this strategy, I guess you could say. And the question is it actually a big deal? Competitors wearing earbuds during tournament rounds. Robbie.
So from an optic standpoint, I think that's what a lot of people try to tackle. I think from an optic standpoint, it is a big deal. Looks a little odd for them to have it in. And also, honestly, from a competitive standpoint, also a big deal. We talk about the mental side of things being a struggle out there on the course. And so for someone like Jen Allen, who has not won on the Pro Tour, but now she is a Pro Tour winner, having the opportunity to get out of her own head, play music, play whatever she's doing. I don't want to take it so far down the road of like, oh, you've got a caddy up the road on the phone call with you and they're looking at the holes. Sure, that could come down to it eventually. But I think solely as a competitor, taking outside influences with the headphones and having like using them for that competitive advantage, you can watch it with amateurs and it takes it all the way up to the Pro Tour. Having those headphones in your ears is a huge deal to help add that competitive advantage.
Okay, so competitive advantage, but you don't think it needs to be taken away.
I do think it needs to be taken away.
You do also think it needs to be taken away.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Jonah, what do you think? Big deal or not?
Unfortunately, I agree with Robbie on this one, but I think it's more so because of the caliber of players we see using the headphones on the course. I mean, number one proponent of it is Paige Pierce. I just think it's really interesting how, she's the one who is, I guess, as a big supporter of this move. It kind of takes away from, her being the best player in the world, like a little bit of her legitimacy if she feels like she is the best player in the world, then put yourself on an even playing field and see how that works out for you. And then we have no idea if anyone's intending to cheat with the headphone thing, but realistically, we really still don't know for sure. I mean, there's really no way to know if someone is in Jen Allen's ear or in Paige's ear about that kind of thing. Do we really think that? Of course not. Both of those players have a very respectable reputation, but that doesn't mean that later down the line someone might take advantage of that. And especially as our sport grows, gets more competitive, people are going to want to take every advantage that they can. And I think that I don't know. Let's just see how it plays out. It's just, and again, the optics thing is not a good look. For before a tournament, before the actual round, I think it's a great tool to get you locked in and dial in those putts. Definitely something I do before my tournaments, but during the round, I just don't think it kind of gives you and your card mates kind of have already some animosity.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good points. I'm going to give Robbie a slight edge on this one. I do think it's with the AirPods, it is definitely about it's a what if a lot of times. I mean, there's definitely a competitive advantage, even just being able to tune out things with music. But it really comes down to, like you said, Jonah, we don't really know what's in their ears. They could be using a metronome to help timing. There are just too many implications of what if, and it doesn't look great optics. It isolates you from your card, which isn't great either. So yeah, I kind of agree with that one, but that one has been, I think people are starting to settle on that, but it is popular. I will say, Jonah, I do think Paige Pierce won most of her majors without earbuds or AirPods in.
Yeah, it's a recent development.
It's definitely a recent development.
So
but
yeah,
she's trying to get that competitive advantage back if she's doing anything she can to get back.
It's true. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic. Jonah, you'll lead off with this one. Is it actually a big deal? West Coast events are displaying far weaker fields than other stops on tour. Jonah.
Yeah, I mean, quick shout out to touchingdiscs.com if you guys want to check out the rating and rating adjustment for the region. But yeah, I think it's definitely not a big deal because I think that touring players, if they have the belief within themselves that they can win an event, they're going to go out and go to it. And especially if the West Coast fields are weaker, then I feel like more players should be out there. That's really the vibe out there on tour. Granted, obviously travel restrictions is still a thing for certain players. A lot of times because either the course style doesn't fit their game, or they just don't want to have to make all those travel expenses, which I think is really just downright awful that we're having professionals think about budgeting their season like that. But I think, bottom line, if a professional disc golfer has a chance to win a big event like Portland, then they should be able to go out there and prove themselves. But then again, it's also not a big deal because it also creates different storylines. We had Carter Aaron shoot a course record out at Milo. And we otherwise don't normally get to see new players emerge like that, especially in today's day and age in the Pro Tour. So I think that really not a big deal. Then, different swings also gave different vibes.
Yeah, certainly. Robbie, what do you think? Big deal or no?
I think it is a big deal because there are so many question marks that are raised by it. We look at Chris Dickerson as someone notorious for not heading over to the West Coast Tour, and for a long time had kind of explained it from a financial standpoint. Signs with Discraft, gets a huge backing, has the opportunity. Now it's not a financial thing, and yet Chris is still not choosing to head out to West Coast Golf. So is it West Coast Golf that is making players not want to go out there? Because it seems like the courses are beautiful. There are some awesome, it tests a lot of shot shaping opportunities. And so there's something happening that is keeping players from heading out to the West Coast to do these things. And in terms of seeing the alternate storylines, talking about Carter, I think that's a phenomenal thing if we had a secondary tour or we had, silver events as an opportunity for players to showcase and get those extra storylines. I think that the major events on the West Coast, like Portland Open, should be one of the strongest fields that we see in disc golf as an elite plus. I'm going to be so curious looking at this field strength on the other side of things, because how are we going to call one of the biggest events outside of a major, and yet there are major players not at the event? So huge deal.
With all due respect to Chris Dickerson, I think that his issue is more of a flying thing than it is an actual travel thing. I could be incorrect about that.
He cited that. He has cited that in the past. I do think, though, it is just interesting that a lot of players just aren't willing to make that trip out there. It's something to look at the future. I mean, we definitely want to have the tour span the country and spread the sport all over the place, but like having a plus event there and then maybe not having the strongest field, something to look at. All right, on to our last subject. Robbie with a 2-point lead here, and he'll be leading off. I think this is an interesting topic as the field strength changes. I'm talking about like the entire tour strength changes from year to year. And, in years past, for a player of the year, and we'll go MPO for this, but for years past, a player of the year might have needed to win 6-7 times to even be thought of. But that's certainly changed. So my question here is, regardless of who the player is, that doesn't matter for this question. What will the eventual player of the year's resume look like at the end of the season? So we're talking about wins, what kind of wins, majors, etc. Robbie, what do you think?
Well, it's easy. I already mentioned it in a previous question. Paul McBeth might well be on his way as a 5-time Pro Tour winner with the silver events. But no, I think it comes down to, I think that you're going to have a major, and I would sub a major out for 2 Elite Series wins. So with there only being 4 possible majors for MPO players to win, 5 obviously majors on the Pro Tour for women, or I guess 4 because Throw Pink doesn't count.
It's a major in our hearts. It counts.
The real one. So I think that you're going to see the winner, the player of the year is going to have 3 or 4 Elite Series wins and a major. If they don't have the majors tacked on, I think they're going to have to get to that 5 or 6. The curious part about the player of the year in this push is that it's been mentioned many times on this podcast before. Why do majors count so much more? Because the players count it as so much more. So it's going to be interesting if we get to the player of the year debate, where I think that's going to add some resolution to the conversation from what the PDGA, from what the Pro Tour is looking at. And do they count majors as meaning more in this setup? And I think that would showcase if your player of the year maybe has 1 major and 1 Elite Series win. That's really going to showcase it all.
It is definitely the golden question. How many Elite Series wins equals a major? Jonah, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, according to Robbie, that would mean that someone with 2 majors is not winning player of the year over somebody with 5 Elite Series wins. I don't think that's true at all. Let's say Calvin, I think he has 2 Elite Series wins this year. And let's see, he rattles off 3 more, but then Isaac Robinson goes on to win USDGC. I think Isaac Robinson's your player of the year for the MPO side. I think that, if you have, especially because there's only 4 majors, having more than 1 is such a huge benefit to that player in terms of what that actually means and what they're really going to be remembered for. It's going to say 2-time major champion next to him and on all the discs with his name on it from now until the end of time. And where, it's only a matter of time until, Calvin's, I think Calvin's Toro say a 5-time Elite Series winner on there. Who really cares about that at the end of the day? So, I mean, granted, obviously having a big season in terms of Elite Series wins is important. And I think if there's a tie in there, it's going to come down to, finishing places and who's most consistent throughout the year. I think that is kind of something that kind of goes overlooked. If someone finishes in the top 5 at every single event, then then another player has a big win and then, doesn't come inside the top 10 the rest of the year. It comes down to that. I would go with a more consistent player throughout the year. I think also something that's missing from the player of the year debate is a player vote. I'm not sure if that's something that the PDGA or the Pro Tour is looking to include, but if you include a player vote, the player can't vote for themselves. But including a player vote would actually give a realistic view of what the players think is the real player of the year as well. So I hope that gets included in the future.
Yeah, it's very difficult to argue how much is the major worth versus the Elite Series. I've always it's tough for me because I get really stuck around 2 feels right, but then it's a little bit more. I almost feel 2.5 is the right number, but obviously it's hard to translate. Jonah, your situation of if a player won 2 majors and no other wins versus a 5-time Elite Series winner, that's tough because you said, it's almost like winning when there's only 4 majors. It's almost like each one you win should be more of a multiplier rather than an addition because it is so difficult. That would be a very hard scenario to judge because winning 5 times is also insane.
A lot of the Elite Series are only 3, so that's nothing to keep in consideration as well.
Also a valid point. Ultimately, Robbie is taking the episode,
so
though.
close.
Very close. Very
Well
close.
thought, Jonah.
He pulled it out in the end, 14-13. Robbie, what do you have to say?
Guys, honored to be here. Really felt like carrying my momentum. I know one of my wins is the silver event win with only 3 members on the podcast, so it feels nice to get a genuine dub and respect. Yeah, nothing to say except thank you, Simon, for allowing outrageous takes.
Yeah, I will say sometimes, Robbie, your argumentative stances and you're willing to be brave and stand up for those takes. It's entertaining to me, and therefore I will reward you for that. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
We need roller only zone Robbie C t-shirts now claiming intellectual property.
Yes. Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode of Debate Night, make sure to give it a like. We remember this episode was pre-recorded. There'll be one more episode like that next week while we're out on tour. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for West Coast content from us. But other than that, we'll see you next week.